And we're just discussing quickly the importance of not speaking after someone hears hamotzi until they eat the bread. Very often there's a misconception that, the person made hamotzi, I can start talking. That's a problem because it's an interruption. You cannot speak until you eat the bread of the Seuda as well. Now what about in a scenario where the person who's making hamotzi, the botzea is what he's called, the person who breaks the bread, he accidentally speaks before eating the bread, but me as the listener, I didn't speak. What's the scenario? What's the halacha? So it's actually a big machloket at poskim. There are some poskim that say, because it's shomer ke'oneh, and you're following after his beracha, and you didn't speak, as if you made your own beracha, you didn't interrupt yet, you can now continue to eat the bread, no problem, and it's fine. And all the poskim say, no, you're following him, you're following his lead. If he accidentally spoke before eating the bread, then it interrupts you have a problem also, and you have to make, and everyone has to make another beracha. The halacha Ravadia explains that because of the concept of safek brachot le'akel, in a scenario where the person making hamotzi accidentally didn't know better, he spoke before eating the bread, but you as the listener heard the bracha, answered amen, and were careful not to speak, you're okay. You do not have to make a bracha again. Just make sure you eat your bread before speaking, and you're fine. Now, what about the bread that you break off, the prusat habetzia, the bread that you're using for hamotzi? This is also important halacha, that the people listening to the person making hamotzi should not eat their bread until the person making a hamotzi takes a taste of it first. So very often in our circles, we want to give kavod eteram to the older people. So you break the bread, you serve it to them first. Halacha actually says you have to be very careful. That person who made the beracha, he must eat the beracha first because he's making the beracha on everyone's behalf. However, if everyone has two breads in front of them, like in some schools or some yeshivot, it'll be more lenient. Also, mitzvah libtzoa prusa gdola shetafsiku b'koseuda. It's a mitzvah to break a large piece of the bread so people can eat from it during the entire meal. Because again, Shabbat meal, we want to show that we're going lavish and we're enjoying, and we don't want to hold back from our Shabbat meal. And ideally, you should put a kezait of bread in front of everyone. Now, what about what type of bread is fitting for Lechem Mishne? We've already explained this, that the bread you use for hamotzi must be complete. We never take a cut bread for hamotzi on Shabbat because it needs to be a complete and shalem bread. Very often when you bake a tray of chalot together, they rise and they stick together. You're allowed to separate them. It's not considered like you're using a ripped bread. That's okay to use for hamotzi on Shabbat. And the last but not least, what about frozen challah? We explained that you need to have 2 loaves of bread. What if I have 1 loaf of bread that I want to eat? I warmed it up, I'm excited, and I realize, the second challah is still frozen. Can I use them both together? As Lechem Mishne, obviously I'm not going to eat the frozen one. I want to put it back in the freezer or whatever I'm going to do with it. But can I use that frozen challah to be the Lechem Mishne? Halacha explains that Ravadi explains that because that frozen challah will melt and defrost soon, it's considered as if it's already defrosted and you're allowed to use it for hamotzi. So in a scenario where you're stuck, I have 1 challah that's warm, that's ready, another challah that's frozen, you're allowed to put them together to make hamotzi, then put the frozen one back where you got it from, or leave it there, whichever one you prefer, and it's okay to use as Lechem Mishne. Obviously, if you have a second loaf of bread or second pizza or something that's not frozen, it's better to use that. But in a scenario where you're stuck, you can use a frozen challah as Lechem Mishne. Have a wonderful day and a Shavua Tov.